Have you ever actually stopped to ask yourself if your political thoughts are truly your own? Or are you maybe just operating on inherited software, kind of seeing the world through this pre-programmed lens that you didn't even know was there? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the architecture of belief to really understand the power, the history, and the hidden mechanics of political ideologies.
Let's jump right in with a brilliantly provocative quote from the famous UK economist John Maynard Keynes. He said, "Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influences are usually the slaves of some defunct economist." I love this because it establishes something absolutely fundamental. Ideas aren't just, window dressing used by politicians to win votes. They are the unseen forces that inspire activism, dictate policy, and literally shape our material reality. Ideas don't just drop from the sky. They're inextricably linked to human action.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the power of ideas, what exactly an ideology is, the anatomy of ideologies, mapping the political spectrum, and finally, classical versus new ideologies. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Power of Ideas. The Invisible Lens.
So think of ideologies as a perspective, a lens through which we view the entire world, because the reality is, people rarely see the world exactly as it is. Instead, we see it as we expect it to be. This veil of ingrained assumptions structures our understanding, sets our political goals, and crucially, acts as a sort of social cement. It binds groups together with a shared sense of belonging and stability. But how does this lens become completely invisible to us? Well, this brings us to the Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci and his fascinating concept of hegemony. Hegemony is basically the capacity of the dominant ideas in a society to totally displace rival views. When an ideology is truly successful, it stops looking like an ideology altogether. It embeds itself in art, education, the media, our everyday language, until it just masquerades as simple, unquestionable common sense.
Moving right along to Section 2. What is an ideology? A history of suspicion. Believe it or not, the term ideology was actually coined way back during the French Revolution in 1796 by Antoine Destutt de Tracy. Now, he intended it to be this new, objective science of ideas. But very quickly, it turned into a political weapon. It became a term people used primarily to condemn rival belief systems while protecting their own. Historically, we can split how we view ideology into two main camps. First, there's the classical Marxist view, which basically sees ideology as a mass delusion. Marx actually used this brilliant metaphor of a camera obscura, an inverted lens that presents the world totally upside down. In his view, ideology masks class oppression and tricks people into accepting a highly unequal status quo. But then you have the modern non-Marxist view, which completely strips away all that negative baggage. Today, social scientists treat ideology simply as a neutral, action-oriented system of beliefs. So it's not inherently good or bad, true or false. It's really just the intellectual map that guides organized political action.
Which brings us to Section 3, the anatomy of ideologies. How beliefs are built. Let's lift the hood and see how these things actually work. If you look at the internal engine of literally every single ideology, it requires the intersection of three specific things. First, it offers a critique of the existing order, basically a worldview of how things are right now. Second, it advances a vision of the future, or the good society. And third, and this is the overlap right at the bottom, it provides a specific theory of political change. It gives us the roadmap of how to get from our flawed present to that ideal future.
Now, because ideologies constantly blend descriptive facts with normative values, kind of blurring what is with what should be, they act as paradigms. As Thomas Kuhn pointed out, they provide the very framework within which we search for knowledge in the first place. And honestly, this is exactly why people often fiercely deny that their own beliefs are ideological. When a belief system provides the very concepts you use to make reality make sense, your own ideology becomes completely invisible to you.
We can actually classify these belief systems using a great metaphor, conceptual furniture. Think of it like a kitchen. You can swap out the microwave or replace the sink, but it's still a kitchen as long as the core setup is there, right? Every ideology has core, adjacent, and peripheral concepts. Notice the difference between thick ideologies like liberalism or conservatism, which have a really broad, robust set of core values, versus thin-centered or cross-cutting ideologies. These thinner ones, like feminism or anarchism, are much narrower. They actually sit on top of the thicker ideologies, which creates these hybrid forms we see all the time, like socialist feminism or liberal conservatism.
Let's take this to the real world in Section 4, mapping the political spectrum, plotting our beliefs.
Here's a fun fact. Did you know the concepts of left and right actually trace all the way back to the seating arrangements at the 1789 French Revolution? It's true. The radicals sat on one side and the aristocrats sat on the other. Today, this classic linear spectrum attempts to plot all our political conceptual furniture on a single line. On the left, we have communism and socialism, which are traditionally associated with a welcoming attitude toward change, progress, equality, and state intervention. And over on the right, we have conservatism and fascism, which are associated with defending the status quo, individualism, and the free market.
But there is a major flaw with this horizontal line. It's just way too simplistic for the real world. For example, think about this. Where exactly do anarchists fit? Anarchism encompasses both anarcho-communist tendencies way out on the far left and anarcho-capitalist tendencies way out on the far right. So a simple, straight line completely fails to capture that level of complexity.
To fix this, some theorists suggest a horseshoe model. This model proposes that as you move out to the extreme wings of the linear spectrum, so toward communism on the left and fascism on the right, they actually start to bend closer together. Why is that? Well, because despite their totally different economic goals, both extremes often share deeply authoritarian or totalitarian traits. The horseshoe is a great way to visualize how political extremes can actually mirror each other when it comes to methods of social control.
But honestly, an even better solution is the two-dimensional spectrum. By adding a vertical axis, representing liberty at the bottom and authority at the top, to our traditional left-right horizontal axis, we capture a much richer, multi-layered reality. Now we can accurately plot something like Stalinism up in the authoritarian left quadrant and anarcho-capitalism down in the liberty right quadrant. It's a real game changer. It gives us a way more precise tool for understanding modern political interactions. Have a look and ask yourself, where do you think you land on this map?
And finally, Section 5. Classical versus new ideologies, the shifting landscape.
You see, the ideological map we just looked at isn't static. Not at all. The transition from industrial societies to post-industrial, globalized societies is fundamentally shifting this entire landscape. We're seeing classical ideologies, the ones that emerged to shape the industrial era and primarily battled over economics and class lines, having to make room for new ideologies. Movements like feminism, green ideology, multiculturalism, and Islamism have gained massive prominence recently. They're rising up to answer the modern call for post-material values. Let's walk through the three major shifts that are defining this new landscape. First, there's a big shift from economics to culture. Today, activism is increasingly less about material wealth and much more about values, beliefs, and ways of life. Second, we see a shift from social class politics to identity politics. Political participation has almost become a lifestyle choice, where people literally mix and match their conceptual furniture. And third, there's a shift from universalism to particularism. So instead of arguing for a universal human core, these new ideologies often stress the politics of difference. They focus heavily on specific gender, local, or ethnic identities.
And what's the massive engine driving all these shifts? It's globalization. And globalization creates this absolutely fascinating paradox. On one hand, it drives this homogenizing cosmopolitan order. Think of it like a global macworld of interconnected free markets and universal rights. But as a direct reaction of that flattening out of the world, globalization simultaneously fuels intense pushback. It empowers localized, identity-based movements and religious fundamentalisms that fiercely resist this global homogenization.
Which brings us to our conclusion. As we've seen throughout this explainer, we all view the world through a veil of assumptions, whether we want to admit it or not. The conceptual furniture in our minds literally dictates our reality. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to take away. Now that you know these lenses actually exist, what is your ideology? What invisible software is running your worldview right now? Take a moment today to critically examine your own paradigm. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the common sense